lumberjack, you know. And then years later, Grizzly Redwood came out, and I was like, well, hell, why did I think of that? But yeah, that was I still have the pants and the flannel shirt and everything from that. That was, God, 25 years ago.
Yeah, I love Grizzly Redwood, and I wish I don't know what he's doing now, but I need to look him up and figure it out because I've loved everything he was doing, and you know the littlest lumberjack is the best, and like you said, who else is doing a lumberjack gimmick anymore? Nobody. Like the last time we really saw a lumberjack anywhere, it was the end of the original Dexter, and it was like, oh, I guess he's a lumberjack now.
Yeah. That gimmick fit him so well, the whole Grizzly Redwood gimmick. That fit him so well. Like, me
Yeah.
doing it, I'm like, I don't look like I've ever swung an axe a day in my life. I'm like, what? But, I mean, we made it work as much as possible. I tried all kinds of weird stuff with it. Instead of wrestling boots, I had, like work boots. And then I bought the old Ranger, remember the old Ranger wading boots that you could go out and do,
Oh yeah.
work in? I had those. I worked in them for a while just because. I remember showing up to a show with those. We were wrestling at it wasn't at Gardens, it was an outside show. And, I show up with these boots and Chris Harris and, Rob the Bomb Williams, I don't even remember now. And Justice, they're all like, are those wading boots? I was like, yeah, I just thought I'd try something different to mess around with the gimmick. It was like, gonna wrestle in waders? I was like, why not? Shit. You know? So I'm wrestling Rob on that show, and he's going over in a match, and we have a good match. He goes, I'm beating you with a fisherman suplex. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, you're wearing wader boots. I'm beating you with a fisherman suplex. I'm like,
I
okay.
love it.
So we had a lot of fun. I don't think
I
I
was
still have those around anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how were those to wrestle in?
They sucked. It was
Yeah.
so good. They didn't last long. I put insoles in them and that, and like they were tight, but once you wrestled in them and worked around in them, they would suction to your feet, and they had
Oh.
grips on the bottom. They had grips on the bottom of them, so like you had to be careful kicking somebody because you would scrape the crap out of them if you weren't careful.
That's so funny. So how did you come up with the Zodiac gimmick? And then also, because the spelling, you do it with a K as opposed to a C. So where did the idea come from, the spelling, and how did that all come together?
So I actually didn't come up with it.
Okay.
Roger Ruffin, who was my main trainer and the guy that, like I said, he owns Bone Crushers and runs Northern Wrestling Federation there. They were trying to think of something different for me, and we had picked up some different gear. And he told me, he's like, find a mask. I'm like, a mask? He's like, yeah, find a mask. I'm like, okay. He goes, if you can't find one, I'll find you one. He goes, we're gonna get you a mask. I'm like, okay. And I think it was another garden show. It might have been another Cincinnati garden show. Because I remember it was during a Mighty Ducks game. They used to do different collabs and stuff with them, and like during intermission, or they would be out in the breezeway and set up out there, so people could watch wrestling if they wanted to, or whatnot during the game. So I get there and I've got my gear, which is just plain red tights from K&H and a black singlet, black boots, and they've got a mask for me because I couldn't find one. At the time, it was hard. It was hard to find that stuff at the time. You had to order it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting there with another guy named Dozer, who is actually who I debuted the gimmick with.
Oh.
And I'm like, so what am I doing? He was like, you're going to be the Zodiac. I was like, and my exact words were, what the hell is a Zodiac? I had no clue. And he's like, you're still be basically a masked kind of creepy guy. He's like, remember the Repo Man? And he gave me a couple examples. He's like, you like Buddha and them guys? I'm like, yeah. He goes, okay, think of the 80s masked, sneaky, creepy wrestlers. Because Dozer was a big, big guy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And he goes, I just think a mask will help you out quite a bit. And he wrestled in a mask for the longest time, too. Spoiler was another one of my favorites, Don Jardine. So he's like, we're going to put you in a mask and see if it helps you open up a little bit more. He goes, I need a bad guy, too. He goes, and you don't look intimidating at all. He goes, so we're going to put you in a mask. I'm like, okay. And so that night went out there and wrestled Dozer, put Dozer up. He used a big Vader bomb as a finish, this and that. Good, solid match. But I don't know what it was. And Rogerman said, he goes, you turned into a whole different creepy persona with this. He goes, I don't know. He goes, what were you thinking when you were out there? I was like, I just started thinking Great Muta and the way he would creep around and the way like the old Spoiler and Repo Man would creep around and he would rake the guys and this and that. I didn't want to do wrestling moves because I'm supposed to be dirty and nasty. And here's this big 400-pound like hoss guy that looks like a tank. I can't pick him up. And Dozer comes back. He goes, that was one of the best matches I've seen you have in a while. He goes, I think this could work for you.
Wow.
And it just, yeah, and it just kind of evolved from there. And they said it's funny, they said they were sitting there trying to think of a name for me and trying to think of something different for this mask gimmick. And Dozer would dip. And he said, what about Kodiak? Like Kodiak Bear. And he was like, So I was almost Kodiak for a minute, like the bear, which, I mean, that would have been kind of cool too, I guess.
Yeah,
and Roger was like, well, what about Zodiac? Nobody's done a Zodiac gimmick for a minute and actually done something with it. So it went from me as a singles doing this, and I've got the original pictures. They're hilarious. I look ridiculous. I look like one of the conquistadors. It went from that to I did it in a tag with a guy for probably 4 or 5 years. We tagged 4 or 5 years straight. And we did kind of the old conquistadors gimmick where we would switch in and out because our gear matched. But the kicker was I'm 6'1", 260 pounds. He's 5'9", probably 170 pounds. So it was blatant, you could tell, but we would do it so quick behind the referee's back, in and out, and the people would get so mad. But at the same time, they're like, this is kind of entertaining. We won Tag Team of the Year for NWF and this and that. It was a blast.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, over time, I just changed the spelling. The gimmick kind of just started evolving as I traveled out more. Because that 80s style was good for there, but people wanted like a little bit darker gimmick, a little bit more serious, this and that. So I was like, well, let me change the spelling up a bit. So I dropped the C, and I put it with a K to make it look a little bit more dynamic, just something different. And then I changed the up from the more conquistador thing to kind of like more of the Muta style stuff, the kind of darker, creepy stuff and that. And it just kind of kept evolving from there.
No, I love it. And I've noticed you've added like fire or other little things to kind of also, like you said, always evolving a gimmick. And as we've seen with like Chris Jericho and like you said, Muta and other people, evolving your character is something you need to be doing on a regular basis because, I mean, like you just said, you've been wrestling for 25 years. You can't be doing the same thing that you did. Well, obviously you didn't because you're not a lumberjack anymore, but you can't be doing the same gimmick all the time or the same everything without, things getting stale or getting old.
Right. Yeah, that's an old business. I listen to a lot of like self-talk and business talk stuff like Gary Vee, this and that. And that's one of the things they always say is like, if your business doesn't evolve, you're not going to be in business. Like you have to change with times. Even Taker, as old school as he was and still is, he wasn't out doing interviews and doing all this other stuff until after he kind of like was ready to retire. But, his gimmick changed for the times. He went through the whole, the dead man stuff to the ministry, the American Badass with the biker and the last gunslinger. Like it was still him, but so many different evolutions of it. And they were subtle a lot of times. And then he would do one really drastic one and then go back to something else and then it'd be really subtle and then something drastic. And that's why he's had such a good long career, People look at mine like that even, and they're like, I can't believe you've been wrestling this long. I'm wrestling my friends' kids now, and they're like, yeah, I'll be 44 in February.
Wow.
I've been wrestling since I was 19. And I still wrestle now like I did then. Nothing's really changed, I figure as long as I can still do that. I went to an NWA tryout, what was it, October maybe of last year. And that's what, Ricky Morton was there. Ricky was like, how long have you been wrestling now? I was like, too damn long, Ricky. He's like, you still look good though. And that was an example he put. He was like, that's working smart. He can still work. And he works the same
Yeah.
now, you know, and EC3 was there and he was like, how old are you? I was like, I was 43 at the time, 42.
Yeah.
And he was like, I never would have thought that. He's like, even without the mask, you don't look that old. He's like, and you don't move like it. He's like, you work smart. He's like, so that's
Yeah,
all.
if you got Ricky Morton
That's a
saying you
credit to
still
him.
look good, yeah.
Yeah, Ricky's amazing still.
Yeah, and he's still doing Canadian destroyers even though he doesn't need to. And his kid is doing fantastic things as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't think that guy, he'll live past the cockroaches. Like, he's always going to be here.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Carrie's an amazing worker. I hadn't really got to
Yeah.
interact with him much until I went and did that seminar down there, and I went kind of just something to do to see what happens. You know, I knew there was going to be a ton of people there,
hmm
and it was a good networking thing, and it was fun to go down and do. And seeing him interact with people and run things and this and that, he's his dad made over. Like he's going to do really good stuff. I
That's
love watching
awesome.
them tag.
Yeah, it's almost like, I wonder if, they got to fight as to who's going to get the heat and then who's going to get the shine on that because somebody's been doing it for 40 to 50 years and the other one is, learning from the
Uh
best.
huh. I'm pretty sure Carrie's the Robert of the group now.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Now, you've been wrestling since 1999. What do you kind of look back on and what do you think your legacy is going to be in the business? Because like you just said, people still think you are a young man and you haven't been working as long as you have, but, you have, but you've been wrestling smart. So where do you kind of think your legacy would fall?
um, Honestly, I hope I just hope it falls under a category of helping a lot of people get better and make it somewhere, which I have gotten to do. I mean, I've gotten to be more influential, I guess, than I give myself credit for to a lot of people, and I've gotten to rub elbows with a lot of people that when folks find that out, they're like, wait, what? You did what with who? I'm like, yeah, I remember when they started wrestling. Yeah, I'm like, what? Um, we were sitting on the couch one night watching a pay-per-view, and I was BSing with my girlfriend, her mom, and them, and it was funny because it was one of the ones with Punk on it and that. And I was like, I remember being in a locker room with him down in Mid-South down in Clarksville, Indiana. And he's like, we're like,
Wow.
wait, what? They're like, wait, what? I was like, yeah. I was like, we were on the same shows in the locker room, cutting up this and that, working with each other. And they're like, how many of these guys do you know? I'm like, half of them, you know, the
Yeah.
referees and this and that. And like, I'll get messages from some of them, and they want me to help their kids out with stuff, you know, whether it's getting them some gear or this or that. And that's all I really want to do is especially now, not winding down. I'll probably never wind down, but
Yeah.
just keep helping people get ready for the next generation of wrestlers come in, build guys up. You know, I always liked the utility guys too. You know, I love the Barry Horowitzes and like I
hmm
said, and the Repo Mans and the Terry Gibbs and all that. You know, those guys, the Iron Mike Sharps, the utility guys. Those were the guys that could go in and make anybody look good and work with anybody. And that's been the label that I've always really had with a lot of promoters and stuff is Zodi can work with anybody and get a good match out of them and teach them something. You know, it might not be a 5-star spectacular with everybody, but not everybody can do a 5-star spectacular. You know,
This is true.
and it's a double-edged sword because you get in that spot and they want to save you for that spot to be the utility guy to help build guys up because they know they can put you with anybody, but then sometimes that kind of kicks you out of some of the higher end spots, if that makes sense, because they can't put those guys with anybody sometimes, if that makes sense. But
No, that is, without a doubt. And
I enjoy
it
it.
is good. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously good that people trust you to do that. And like you said, if you've got people asking you to help their kids, then I think, you clearly have shown that you do good stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think it is a big compliment.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned you make, gear for people as well. When did that start? It works on multiple levels because I've heard, I've been lucky enough to